The story kicks off with our protagonist in complete denial. He just couldn't believe this was his actual reality. His so-called acclaimed black flames couldn't even scratch the hero's. On top of that, the hero managed to pierce his scales and plunge a sword right into his chest. Our MC simply can't wrap his head around how everything went so wrong. After all, he had always been superior to everyone, graduating as the top student from the Demon King Academy. His strategy came straight from the standard Demon King tactics, a theory established by the first Demon King, and he had studied it more than anyone. Following the manual to the letter, our protagonist built a tower and kidnapped princesses. From there, he helped the heroes who came to rescue the princesses get stronger. This is because, for a Demon King, rage and sorrow are the finest feast, and taking them out too early would be a waste. The tactics said to raise them just enough before devouring them, as stronger heroes would make for tastier prey. He followed this plan with more faith than anyone else and believed that world conquest was just a matter of time. By absorbing the sorrow and rage of countless people and heroes, the protagonist became a Demon King more powerful than any other. But even with all that power, he's the one who ended up on the floor with his last breath. He desperately wonders how this could have happened. The hero then asks why all Demon Kings are the same, and says that even though they create these situations, they always look shocked when things go south. Our MC can hardly believe it, saying the whole thing is just absurd. The hero shoots back, saying they always kidnap the most famous princess to signal that the Demon King's activities have begun. He calls him stupid and says that if it were him, he would have taken out the king to throw the kingdom into chaos. Our protagonist thinks that would be a mistake, as the struggle for the throne would cause an internal war, and the human's anger wouldn't be focused on him. Therefore, he wouldn't be able to grow as a Demon King, since all of that goes against the teachings of the standard tactics. The hero scoffs at him, saying that if they don't go to the tower, he just sends the right monsters to their village and trains them with the utmost care, and once they reach the tower, the situation gets even better, because there are always weak monsters on the first floor, which is perfect for leveling up their skills. The protagonist mentally justifies this, thinking it's a precaution, so the heroes don't fall midway, and so he can gather more energy. All of this happens because it's what the standard tactics teach. The hero then lands another blow on the protagonist, making him feel excruciating pain. He then reveals that when they get tired of the tower, they simply take out the Demon King and wait for a new one to show up, and says the tower is actually a hunting ground for them. His companions agree, thanking the Demon King for making them grow strong, even calling him their godfather. They all mock the protagonist, thanking him for providing the best hunting ground of all. Lying on the ground, he can barely believe his tower was just a training field for heroes. The hero admits he was strong and that many of his comrades ended up falling, but thanks to that, he became famous. With that, he bids the Demon King farewell and prepares to deliver the final blow. Our protagonist then becomes furious for being humiliated by a mere hero, and wonders what the point was of following the standard Demon King tactics. With his last bit of strength, he refuses to go down in vain, for he is the great Demon King. However, the hero finally delivers the final blow, and our protagonist's head goes flying from his body, and he starts seeing everything spin because of it. Even on the brink of his end, our protagonist swears that those who insulted him will pay the price, and as he glares at the hero, he says he'll make him pay. While his companions approach to collect the loot, the hero warns them not to touch the head because the horns are his, but a strange energy begins to emanate from the protagonist's body. Seeing this, the hero gets confused. Our protagonist then decides to offer the rest of his life for one last spell. The hero realizes what's happening and panics, because it's already too late. With that, an immense mass of energy starts pouring out of the Demon King's body, and the hero begins to scream in desperation. The energy emitted by the protagonist's self-sacrifice spell was incredibly powerful. About to meet his final end, the protagonist realizes that the book of standard Demon King tactics was wrong, and he deeply regrets following that book, which only served to let the heroes play with him. He wishes for a second chance to do everything differently and swears that if he could go back in time, he'd feed that book to an orc. After that, an insane explosion rocks the tower. His consciousness begins to fade, but he hears someone calling him Verz Diaz. Suddenly, he opens his eyes, startled. Apparently, our protagonist had returned to his academy days. Standing in the middle of a crowded hall, Verz Diaz wonders what the heck is going on. Desperate, he can hardly believe he's alive. Just then, someone calls his name and tells him to come forward. Not understanding a thing, the protagonist just obeys. At that moment, Verz Diaz begins to recognize the place he's in. The academy's headmaster then asks why a prodigy like him is acting so strangely on graduation day. Our protagonist sees the red badge on his chest and realizes it's a symbol given to all students who graduate from the Demon King Academy. Faced with the situation, he finally understands everything. Somehow he went back 15 years in time to the graduation ceremony of the Demon King Academy. The graduates are called to the podium, and even without knowing how he returned to the past, our protagonist realizes this is his chance to change his destiny. Right after, the master of ceremonies announces that the top student of the class, Verz Diaz, will read the oath as as the representative. Verz Diaz stands before the oath, which is none other than the book of standard Demon King tactics. He glares at those words with a look of contempt. He remembers seeing it until he was sick of it, memorizing every single letter of that useless book. After all, it was that piece of junk that led to his end and turned him into a plaything for the heroes. Our protagonist realizes he'll have to read that oath in front of everyone. His classmates watch him with admiration, having no idea what's going through his mind. Verz Diaz thinks he'll have to swear in front of everyone to follow the teachings that led him to ruin for his entire life. From there, an uncontrollable rage takes over our protagonist. The master of ceremonies notices his hesitation and asks him to read the standard tactics of the great Demon King. Gritting his teeth, Verz Diaz refuses to continue with this farce. With that, he says loud and clear that it's impossible to make that oath. The students in the audience are completely confused by his attitude. Our protagonist then shouts that he can't make such a stupid oath and that following those tactics is utter foolishness. He continues his speech saying that the standard Demon King tactics are complete garbage, his voice echoing throughout the hall, leaving everyone stunned. The reaction of the other students is pure shock and disbelief. The shock is so great that one of the students' glasses even shatters. Even the academy's headmaster is flabbergasted and furious at the top student's attitude. Verz Diaz's shout is so powerful it can be heard from outside the academy. That was the exact moment when the greatest student in the academy's history became the biggest lunatic of all time. With that, one of the royals slams his fist on the table, completely enraged. This is the Grand Duke of the Demon Realm, Arcane Vlameth, and he shouts that for daring to insult the doctrine, he could end Verz Diaz right then and there, but Arcane considers the protagonist's exemplary talent and decides to grant him one last chance. If he retracted his statement and apologized to the entire demon realm, everything would be fine, but if he refused, his mission would be in Arene. The crowd is in shock as Arene is the dimension where demon lords drop like flies, and going there is basically a death sentence. Other demons wonder why he's being given a second chance, since he insulted the doctrine and deserves his fate. The Grand Duke reinforces that our protagonist knows full well what Arene is, the worst place where countless demon kings have lost their lives. Without showing a hint of fear, Verz Diaz simply tells him to send him there. To everyone's astonishment, the protagonist even states that he will go there and prove that the doctrine is nothing but garbage. Arcane loses his patience and says there will be no clemency, assigning Verz Diaz to Arene immediately. He will not receive any of the privileges of a senior demon king, and no demon will accompany him. Furthermore, until the conquest is complete, Verz Diaz is banished from entering the demon realm. As he falls, our protagonist thinks that after all that chaos, it was to be expected, but at least he's back, and so, he is sent to Arene, the place where the heroes who defeated him are. Our protagonist remembers that even before regressing, he had chosen Arene of his own free will. Because of that arrogance, he ended up perishing, as the heroes exploited the weaknesses of the Demon King's doctrine. With that, Verz Diaz lands with a huge impact on a snow-covered mountain. He arrives at the Erzest mountain range on the northern continent, the same place as before. This time, the protagonist won't fall into the same trap, and swears that he will be the one using others. And to do that, he will use the hero's own doctrine against them. Meanwhile, somewhere else, an elegant-looking man is getting ready. He buttons his shirt carefully, preparing for a big event. This is Gordon Derrick, the top graduate of the Demon Folk Training Academy. His academy trains the demons who serve the Demon Kings, and according to the rules, the best demon must serve the best Demon King. His colleagues congratulate him with envy, as he will serve Lord Verz, the top graduate. Gordon responds with a smile, saying that all the Demon Kings they will serve are exceptional people. However, he thinks to himself that none of them compare to Lord Verz. For Gordon, graduating at the same time as a genius from the Morong clan, who will be remembered forever in history, is an unbelievable blessing. He believes that as long as he is by Verz's side, they can conquer any dimension. With a grin from ear to ear, Gordon thinks that alongside his lord, he too will carve his name into demon history. However, a flashback to the graduation brings him back to reality, and he remembers what the protagonist said. The look of shock on Gordon's and everyone else's faces in the audience was unbelievable. No one in their right mind expected the top student of the class to shout that the Demon King's doctrine was garbage. The shock was so great that Gordon's glasses shattered on the spot. Back in the present, in the middle of nowhere in Arene, he remembers the rule that forced him to be there. Gordon simply can't understand why Verz Diaz would do such a thing. Soon after, he sees the protagonist approaching, and thinks that even though they said no demon would accompany him, at least they sent him. Still, the confusion on Gordon's face is more than evident. Verz Diaz then greets him and extends his hand. Gordon, without a second thought, questions him about his actions, but the protagonist plays dumb. Completely desperate, Gordon freaks out and starts shouting about the doctrine, complaining that they are now in Orion and that he's gonna meet his end because of Vers Dias. With all the calm in the world, our protagonist tells him to cool it before he ends up pulling his hair out, which only makes Gordon more furious. Vers Dias then wonders if Gordon was always this dramatic, as he remembered him being much more composed in their first meeting before the regression. In the original timeline, Gordon was super motivated, saying the challenge would be tough, but that together they could do it, and that any place other than Orion wouldn't motivate him one bit. Our protagonist understands that things are different now, so it makes sense that Gordon has also changed. While Vers Dias reflects, Gordon continues to have a nervous breakdown in the middle of the snow. After his meltdown, he apologizes for the tantrum and says he will fulfill his duty, albeit with a not-so-happy face. The first doctrine of the Demon King states that one must build a tower, but in a location that heroes can easily find. Gordon quickly points out that their current location is horrible, surrounded by mountains and strong monsters, making it impossible for humans to reach, but the protagonist completely ignores him and states with absolute certainty that he will build the tower right there. He then takes out a tower seed and plants it in the snow. To make it grow, it must be fed with the Demon King's blood. Gordon panics once again, shouting that this goes completely against the doctrine and that he's abandoning his pride as a Demon King. Our protagonist understands his servant's disgust, knowing that for a demon, it's not easy to deny such a deeply rooted belief. He thinks that only by going through an end like his or something similar can one truly change, and that he himself was once the same. From there, Vers Dias clenches his own fist tightly to draw blood. He extends his hand over the seed and tells Gordon to listen carefully, because the doctrine is garbage, especially in Orion. Gordon is completely frozen by his lord's bold declaration. The snow continues to fall on the mountains as a tense silence hangs between the two. Soon after, the protagonist's blood hits the seed, and it begins to glow with an intense red light. The blood seed absorbs the power, and an immense red energy begins to manifest. With that, a wave of power spreads through the area, showing the grandeur of the tower about to be born. Our protagonist then explains that the doctrine is useless there because Orion has an absurdly ridiculous number of heroes. After all, they were the ones who defeated him in his past life, and he's not going to make the same mistake twice. The tower then begins to identify its user, displaying the name Vers Dias and the race Black Flame Marang. Soon after, the identification is complete, and the tower begins to be summoned. Vers Dias explains that this is why Demon Kings keep falling there. With so many heroes destroying the tower, they eventually figured out the mechanism and exploited the doctrine. Thus, the old doctrine no longer works, and the hero's doctrine is more suitable for this place, leaving Gordon completely confused. The imposing tower finally finishes rising in the middle of the snowy mountains. Gordon looks up, completely shocked, and can hardly believe he actually built the tower there. Without wasting time, Vers Dias calls him inside, and Gordon follows, still hesitant. They arrive at the first floor of the tower, and the place is a huge, completely empty hall. Gordon comments that the place should be a labyrinth or filled with monsters and concludes that this is the type of tower given to Demon Kings without privileges. The two go up to the Demon King's chamber on the 5th floor and discover that all the floors are empty. Gordon then resigns himself and says that since the tower is built, they should at least follow the second rule of the doctrine correctly. The second doctrine of the Demon King states that one must kidnap a prince or princess, specifically someone close to the throne. Gordon then asks his lord for permission to advise him, and our protagonist allows him to speak. From there, he shows a map and suggests the target be the highest-ranking princess of the nearest kingdom, the Kingdom of Corzin. By absorbing her anger and sorrow, Vers Dias could grow strong and quickly. To Gordon's surprise, the protagonist agrees with the plan and reveals he already has a princess in mind. Gordon offers to help, but our protagonist tells him to stay and guard the tower, as a Demon King's residence cannot be left empty. With that, Gordon is relieved and happy, thinking that his lord is finally acting like the top Demon King and that the stress from graduation has passed. He then asks which princess Vers Dias will bring. The protagonist prepares to leave and begins to reveal his true target. He flies towards the nation farthest from the tower, at the extreme south of the continent, the Kingdom of Hildren. The scene then shifts to the balcony of a room in a luxurious castle. Vers Dias appears outside the window, surprising the princess who was inside. His target is the 13th princess, the least notable of all. He looks at her and formally announces that he has come to take her with him. If Gordon knew about the plan, he would surely be screaming that it was complete nonsense. The protagonist faces the princess, who observes him back without showing any fear. With her violet eyes, the girl calmly asks who he is. Vers Diaz answers directly that he is a demon king and is there to kidnap her. Instead of screaming or panicking, the princess just gives a slight smile. Soon after, she challenges him, asking if he can handle her, which leaves our protagonist completely confused. He finds her question quite strange and says she's seriously underestimating a demon king. To Vers Diaz's surprise, the princess agrees to go with him silently, extending her hands in a sign of surrender. Our protagonist finds her calmness very suspicious and asks what her plan is, but she simply replies that, being a princess, she always expected this might happen one day. He remains suspicious, stating that he's desperate in his own way and won't fall for cheap tricks to lower his guard. The princess denies having any plan, arguing that it would be impossible to know a demon king would come today of all days to set a trap. Vers Diaz admits her point is valid but still feels something is very strange. She then extends her hand and asks if they can go now. With that, our protagonist flies her back to his tower in the Erzest Mountains. Arriving there with the princess in his arms, Gordon greets him, relieved at his safe return. The protagonist orders Gordon to place her in a suitable room on the 4th floor. Since she didn't resist, he'll offer some conveniences instead of a cell. Gordon turns to his lord and says he has something to tell him. Meanwhile, on the 4th floor of the tower, the princess finds herself completely alone in a huge, empty hall. She sits on the cold, hard floor, and it finally sinks in that she has really been kidnapped. The girl starts thinking about all the things she doesn't have there, like a pillow, a blanket, or a maid to serve her. Besides that, she misses her beautiful garden and everything she left behind in the kingdom. But to everyone's surprise, she cracks a mischievous smile and thinks the situation isn't bad at all. Back in the throne room, Vers Diaz questions an invitation he received from the Beast Tower. Gordon confirms it's a welcome party for the new Demon King, but our protagonist suspects it's just a prank for the rookie. Demon Kings are naturally proud beings and don't usually band together, but the peculiar nature of Aryan broke that pride and forced them to work together. Vers Diaz remembers ignoring them in the past for being weak, but this time he decides he'll at least try a little interaction. With that, he heads to the Beast Tower, an ancient, vine-covered structure in the middle of a jungle. There he meets the bestial demon king Draxon, an imposing being who has ruled that place for 72 years. Draxon glares at him and asks if he's the new demon king, commenting that he heard about the insult to the standard tactics, but that he doesn't look like much. Our protagonist gets visibly annoyed and thinks he shouldn't have come, bluntly telling Draxon to get to the point. The bestial demon king laughs and reveals that Grand Duke Arcane sent him to get a good look at Vers Diaz when he arrived. Our protagonist responds with disdain, calling the Grand Duke an old, noisy vampire, and even wonders if he's mad for throwing him into Aryan. Draxon becomes enraged at the rookie's audacity and yells that he must have a lot of nerve to call Grand Duke Arcane that. In a gesture of humiliation, the bestial demon king throws a piece of meat on the floor, right in front of Vers Diaz. He then orders the protagonist to lick the bone, and in return, he would forgive his rudeness for now. Vers Diaz asks if he doesn't know the reason for his visit, and Draxon confirms he knows it was because of the insult to the standard tactics. With a smirk, our protagonist reminds him that according to those same tactics, demon kings are forbidden from taking each other out. From there, he simply stumps hard on the bone that was thrown on the floor, shattering it into pieces. The stump is so powerful that the shockwave pushes the bestial demon king back. Vers Diaz glares at him and asks if he really believed someone who insulted the entire doctrine would follow a rule like that. Draxon is completely shocked and intimidated by the protagonist's overwhelming fighting spirit. Sweating bullets, he reveals Arcane's other order, which was to keep an eye out in case Vers Diaz kidnapped a princess, and that if there was no report in a month, his authority would be questioned. Our protagonist, already turning to leave, reveals that he has already kidnapped a princess, leaving the bestial king dumbfounded. And to top it off, he says it was a princess he liked, not one the doctrine ordered. After this show of power, the two return safely to Vers Diaz's imposing tower. Back on his throne, Gordon praises him for magnificently showing the dignity of a demon king, and Vers Diaz replies that for now, they can't do anything else. Sitting on his throne, the protagonist says they need to be prepared and orders Gordon to check on the princess's condition, as he needs to figure out how to use her. As Gordon leaves to carry out the order, the snow continues to fall outside the tower window, creating a cold and isolated scene. Alone, Vers Diaz feels a sharp headache and reflects that if the other demon kings are like that one, the situation is going to get very complicated. He realizes that the consequences of insulting the standard tactics are greater than he imagined, but he still doesn't regret his decision, because for our protagonist, it's better to face the end than to submit to garbage like that doctrine that led to his ruin. Determined not to make the same mistake, he decides to build a secure base, and upon checking his demonic energy, expects to have gained only a few hundred points. However, to his utter surprise, the panel shows that he has accumulated 13,219 points. The protagonist is completely confused and breaking out in a cold sweat, not understanding how he gathered so much energy with a single princess. Suddenly, a notification appears in the air, informing him that a video message from the Beast Tower has arrived. Verzdia stares at the message icon, somewhat surprised by the sudden contact from his rival. The message is from Draxon, who congratulates him and says that although their first meeting was rough, as a senior demon king, he should praise him. The bestial king continues, saying that what he did was a tremendous feat, difficult to achieve in Aryan, and even asks if insulting the tactics was some kind of trick. Hearing that, our protagonist feels a chill run down his spine and realizes something is very wrong. At that exact moment, Gordon appears, running desperately, and shouts that a disaster is happening on the 4th floor. The scene then cuts to an incredibly beautiful and vibrant garden, full of life, with a waterfall and colorful butterflies everywhere. Our protagonist arrives on the 4th floor and is met with a completely unexpected scene. The entire floor has been transformed into a natural paradise with the status of naturalization in progress. The princess greets him, surrounded by elemental spirits, and the protagonist is shocked to realize she has created a magical environment inside his tower. He understands that this can only be achieved by someone who has mastered the 4 elements and remembers that on the entire continent, there is only one genius spirit summoner capable of such a feat. Realizing the truth, Verzdiaz accuses her of not being the 13th princess, and she confirms his suspicion, saying he must have mistaken her for Alina. The protagonist turns pale with fear as he realizes who she really is. With a victorious smile, the girl reveals her true identity as Hernan Hilderin, the first princess of the Kingdom of Hilderin. The news of the crown princess's kidnapping spreads quickly through the kingdom, causing an uproar. The King of Hilderin is completely furious and orders the immediate mobilization of the strongest heroes and the entire army. His sole objective is to cut off the foolish demon king's head and bring his precious princess back. Hernan then explains with a malicious smile that this is why she asked if he could handle her. Verzdiaz wonders how he didn't notice the mana overflowing from her, and she explains that a special ring conceals her presence. This ring is a treasure passed down through generations in the royal family, which is why he was fooled. She taunts him, asking if his curiosity is satisfied and if he will send her back now. Our protagonist thinks that if he returns the princess, he'll become a laughingstock, and that no kingdom fears a coward, which will make collecting demonic energy even harder. Verzdiaz understands he has no choice but to continue with his risky plan. Suddenly, a system alert informs him that multiple points of rage are being directed at him, and his demonic energy climbs to 19,521. The protagonist realizes he's been identified but states that even if Hernan isn't the 13th princess, nothing will change. He reinforces with conviction that she is still his hostage, and the girl just watches him. Meanwhile, in the Kingdom of Hilderin, chaos erupts with the news of the kidnapping. The King of Hilderin shouts furiously from his throne, ordering his men to cut off the demon king's head and bring his daughter back. One of his advisors tries to calm him, explaining that they still don't know which demon king did this, and that scouts have already been sent. The monarch loses his patience and bellows for them to hurry, as the crown princess has been taken and there's no time for delays. Faced with the situation, another noble finds it all very strange and reminds everyone that the Debeman King of Lust had recently kidnapped a prince from another country. He continues his reasoning, explaining that that demon king attracted so much hatred that he ended up being eliminated by heroes, which makes it very strange for another to do the same thing. The other nobles are surprised by the observation, as they hadn't considered that possibility. The King of Hilderin's fury is so intense that he grips the arm of his throne with immense force. With clenched teeth, he deduces that the one behind this can only be a rookie. Soon after, a knight runs into the throne room and reports that they found traces of a teleportation magic circle that leads to the Erzist Mountains. The king is completely astonished to hear about the unexpected location. Verzdiaz's tower stands imposing and solitary in the middle of the vast and icy Erzist Mountains. Back on the throne, Gordon worriedly reports that the Hilderin army will arrive soon and questions whether a newly arrived demon king can handle the situation. At this, our protagonist just gives a confident smirk, completely sure of his plan. He then reassures his servant, stating with absolute certainty that the Kingdom of Hilderin cannot mobilize its national army. Meanwhile, in the kingdom, the King of Hilderin and his advisors analyze a map and realize the big problem. The mountains are in the far north, and their kingdom is in the far south. Verzdiaz explains that precisely because of the distance, the chance of the various countries in the way opening a path for an enemy army is practically zero. With no other options, the monarch feels cornered and orders them to contact the Heroes Guild. The scene then takes us to the imposing tower of the Heroes Guild, a central hub for the adventurers of Orion. Inside, the heroes discuss the rescue mission, but most refuse to go, as the place is too dangerous and full of calamity-class monsters. The protagonist reveals he was counting on this, as heroes are mercenaries who only care about money, and would never risk themselves in such a dangerous place for free. Gordon is utterly shocked and realizes that his lord calculated every detail, and that even without following the doctrine, he seems to know Arian inside and out. The servant concludes that it's almost as if the Demon King has already lived through all of this before. Back at the castle, the King of Hilderin explodes with fury upon learning that no hero has signed up for the mission. He despairs because in Orion, heroes interact through the guild and calculate profits, so they rarely move unless the reward is well worth it. Verzdias explains that because of this, it will take them a while to form a group, and in the meantime, he accesses the system to buy some skeletons and strengthen his defenses. Sitting on his throne, our protagonist analyzes the situation and realizes that even with the demonic energy he has accumulated, it's not enough to deal with a legion of heroes. He vividly remembers the terror of facing the overwhelming number of enemies in his past life and knows from experience just how painful that can be. Because of this, Verzdias orders Gordon to contact Draxon, as he needs to sell demonic energy in exchange for human currency. Gordon simply can't process the order and has a complete meltdown, screaming in disbelief at his lord's crazy idea. He continues freaking out, listing all the incredible uses of demonic energy, like breaking species limits and summoning monsters, and can't believe the protagonist is going to sell it all for mere money. Verzdias calmly explains that Draxon will pay a large sum, and that although his current energy isn't enough to stop the heroes, with human money, he can do something about it. The scene then takes us to the fortress city of Horton Walk, a location near the Erzist Mountains. Our protagonist arrives at the city gates completely hooded, and is immediately stopped by two guards. He identifies himself as a mercenary, but the guards find it very suspicious, as no mercenary in their right mind would enter the mountains alone and come back alive. To resolve the situation quickly, Verzdias tosses a gold coin to one of the guards, who is visibly surprised by the bribe. After passing the guards, he thinks that now he needs a guide, as he can't just wander around the city alone. As he walks through the bustling square, the protagonist reinforces the idea that his first priority is to find a local guide. The scene shifts to the headquarters of the Red Falcon mercenaries, where one of the members suggests they should leave, but the relaxed captain sees no reason to leave such a good spot. The captain explains that it's a gold mine there, as the soldiers take care of the monsters, and they just need to collect the byproducts to profit. Another mercenary then comments on the rumor of a new demon king in the mountains who supposedly kidnapped the princess of Hilderin, but the captain scoffs and doubts the story. Another mercenary adds that the Heroes Guild turned down a hefty sum just from hearing the destination was in the mountains. One of the men gets worked up and shouts that the princess is the heir to the throne, which is why the heroes are playing hard to get just to squeeze out more money. The captain bursts out laughing and agrees, saying it's just like them to act like money-grubbing maniacs. Out of nowhere, the protagonist appears like a ghost behind the laughing captain and stares at him with a creepy smile. The man jumps in fright and screams in terror, asking who the mysterious figure is. Verzdias reveals his face and says they seem well informed, which makes them perfect as guides, then tells everyone but one to get out. Three of the mercenaries are furious at the intruder's audacity and charge at him, swearing he won't leave the headquarters alive. Our protagonist doesn't even flinch and knocks out all three with quick, precise punches. Showing his superiority, he continues the assault, moving with speed through the hall, taking down everyone who gets in his way. Seeing this, a brute tries to crush the Demon King with a giant club. To everyone's surprise, Verzdias stops the attack with just one hand and shatters the opponent's weapon. With his eyes glowing red and a sinister smile, he shows that the big guy's strength is nothing to him. The giant mercenary is completely frozen in fear and starts to break out in a cold sweat in the face of such power. Desperate, some crossbowmen run up the stairs to try and attack the protagonist from a distance. In response, the Demon King unleashes a shockwave that sweeps through the entire bar, sending tables, chairs, and the remaining mercenaries flying. The captain is completely terrified and screams that the protagonist is a monster, while Verzdias just gives a wicked grin, enjoying the situation. The chaos inside the bar is so intense that the sound of the brawl echoes through the city streets. Two people outside comment that the Red Falcon mercenary group is fighting again and wonder if they ever get tired of causing trouble. After the dust settles, the scene is one of pure destruction, with all the mercenaries down on the floor, and only our protagonist standing amidst the chaos. Diaz then approaches the terrified captain and interrogates him about the location of the slave market, promising to spare his life in exchange for the information. From there, the mercenary leads him to a luxurious mansion that serves as a front for the illegal market. The two walk through the property's gardens, with the captain acting as the Demon King's guide. Inside, the man shows him a cage full of human slaves, but the protagonist doesn't seem satisfied with what he sees. He asks for rarer goods and throws a bag of gold to the captain, who is shocked by the amount of money. With a greedy smile plastered on his face, the mercenary agrees instantly and offers to take him to the most valuable items. Diaz reflects that humans and demons aren't so different, as both are driven by greed, whether for money or demonic energy. With that, they descend a stone staircase towards a more secret area of the market. The captain guides him down a dark corridor, pointing the way to the section with the rarest and most expensive slaves. The scene cuts back to the tower, where Gordon questions what his lord would do with human money, and Diaz reveals his plan is to buy slaves of other races. His true objective was to find an elf known for their purity and innocence, as corrupting one would be the perfect way to generate an absurd amount of demonic energy. Besides generating energy, Diaz plans to use an elf as a spy to completely confuse the heroes. In the meantime, back in the kingdom of Hilderin, a hero named Hillen Cargill arrives in the throne room, much to the king's relief. Kneeling before the monarch, the hero swears he will rescue the crown princess and bring back the Demon King's head. With a look full of determination, Hillen Cargill declares he will do everything in the name of justice. Back at the slave market, the protagonist's plan to use elves to deceive the heroes is about to begin. The tactic is brilliant because since elves are known for being pure and honest, no one would ever suspect them. The Demon King then turns to the merchant and says he wants to buy the elf and that the mercenary captain will foot the bill. Faced with Diaz's intimidating aura, the merchant agrees instantly, while the captain reluctantly hands over the gold. Next, our protagonist tells them both to leave as he needs to inspect the merchandise, but the merchant warns that the elf might freak out. Diaz reassures him, saying that if anything happens, the captain there will compensate for the damages. Right after the two leave, the protagonist approaches the cage and opens the door for the chained elf. He then uses his demonic energy to break the chains that bound the noble elf who had been reduced to a slave. The elf is shocked to feel the energy and realizes his savior is a demon, questioning his intentions. The Demon King then offers him a chance for revenge against the humans who captured him. Despite the tempting offer, the elf is suspicious and says a demon's tongue is as treacherous as a human's. Our protagonist claims to be different and proposes a deal: 50 years of loyalty in exchange for guaranteed safety and freedom. He even argues that 50 years is nothing for an elf, and that it's much better than being humiliated forever by humans. The elf, however, refuses the offer, as demons are enemies of the world tree that his race serves and protects. With a look of pure contempt, he questions how he could trust a being who seeks the destruction of everything he loves. He also points out that it's very strange for a demon to seek the help of an elf, and our protagonist thinks he's hit a sensitive spot. With a malicious smile, Diaz decides to change his tactic to convince him. From there, he summons the book of the great principles of the Demon King and swears he will not touch the world tree and will keep all his promises. The elf is shocked as he understands that the principles are to demons what the world tree is to elves, and the protagonist takes the opportunity to demand that he also swear loyalty for 50 years. The elf calls him a strange demon but seems to consider the proposal, since he's willing to make such a serious oath. He then introduces himself as Granada of the Maple clan and agrees to make the oath, but only after meeting the Demon King who sent him. With a confident smile, our protagonist reveals that he doesn't need to wait, because he is the Demon King himself. Granada is completely stunned and speechless at the unexpected revelation. Soon after, he bursts into laughter and says the idea is ridiculous, as a Demon King would never stray from his tower to personally rescue a slave. With that, Granada makes a new promise, saying that if he really is the Demon King, he will serve him for 100 years instead of 50. The scene then cuts to the 5th floor of Diaz's tower, where we see the three of them walking through the immense throne room. Sitting on his throne, Diaz reminds the elf with a victorious smile of the 100-year contract he himself proposed, while Granada freaks out upon realizing he really is the Demon King. Completely desperate, Granada shouts that it's a fraud because no one ever said the tower would be so empty. He points out that up to the 3rd floor, there is absolutely nothing, just gigantic, lifeless halls, and to make matters worse, the 4th floor is just a garden, and he can't believe how a Demon King's tower can be so fragile and without a single monster to defend it. From there, Granada predicts that at this rate, the protagonist won't last a year and that the heroes will defeat him easily, so he refuses to work in such a place. Our protagonist then unleashes an overwhelming demonic aura and coldly reminds him of the contract they made. Faced with that crushing pressure, tower, the elf is finally convinced that the man before him is indeed the Demon King. He recalls the journey to the tower and how the monsters of Erzist didn't dare to attack them, and with that, he understands they couldn't touch the Demon King and decides he might actually get his revenge. Thus, Granada kneels before the throne and swears by the great world tree that he will serve him faithfully for the next 100 years. He believes that since the Demon King came to get him personally, he must have a very important mission for him, and as part of this evil plan, he will finally get his revenge on the humans. But our protagonist shatters all expectations and first tells him to go get something to eat. The elf is completely lost at the unexpected order, and his mind goes completely blank. Soon after, we see Granada in the kitchen, wearing an apron, chopping vegetables, and trying to convince himself that this is definitely part of a very important plan. Hernan appears with her elemental spirits and offers to help cook, leaving the elf even more confused by the bizarre situation in this tower. From there, they all gather in the 5th floor dining room for a meal in a setting that is, to say the least, unusual for a Demon King's residence. Sitting at the table, Granada questions the Demon King about the identity of the blonde woman accompanying them. With all the calm in the world, Verzdias confirms that she is Hernan Hilderin, the crown princess. Hearing this, the elf completely freaks out, shouting that the protagonist is crazy for kidnapping the princess, and having no defenses in the tower. Our protagonist replies that that's exactly why he bought him and then offers him a piece of food to calm down. Verzdias even praises Granada's cooking skills, and Hernan enthusiastically agrees, which leaves the elf utterly bewildered by the bizarre situation. Shortly after, the two go to the 4th floor garden, and Granada asks if they should fight the heroes there, but the Demon King explains that if a hero reaches the tower, the game is already over. From there, he reveals Granada's true mission to become his spy in the human world, but before that, he needs one little thing. The protagonist explains that he first needs to test the elf's skills and challenges him to a fight, which makes Granada hesitant about his chances. To make the fight fair, Verzdias offers to fight with only one hand and promises to reduce the contract back to 50 years if Granada wins. The proposal ignites the elf's fighting spirit, who accepts the challenge on the spot and unleashes his full power for the battle. With that, the fight begins, and Granada advances with a series of quick, precise strikes against the Demon King. Our protagonist blocks the attacks with ease and comments that Granada's movements are impressive for a former slave and that he used mana from the environment to strengthen himself. The elf boasts, saying he's no ordinary elf and that Verzdias chose the wrong place and the wrong opponent to fight. Taking advantage of the terrain, Granada uses nature magic to summon vines and bind the protagonist's legs. Seeing an opening, he prepares an energy punch, shouting that the Demon King owes him 50 years. With a satisfied smile, our protagonist thinks that Granada's skill is sufficient for his plans, but he still needs to show who's boss. From there, Verzdias unleashes a crushing demonic aura and reminds the elf not to forget who he's fighting against. He even mocks him, saying he won't use magic and will control his strength, just so he doesn't end Granada's life. Seeing that absurd display of power, the elf panics and tries to ask him to wait. Soon after, an immense wave of energy explodes from within the tower, showing the result of the little skill test. The scene then shifts back to the fortress city in the Hodan area, at the headquarters of the Red Falcon mercenaries. There, the group's captain welcomes the protagonist back with exaggerated enthusiasm and an extravagant greeting. Verzdias gets straight to the point and says he wants to hire the group for a year, but the captain doubts he has the money for it. To everyone's surprise, our protagonist throws a giant sack overflowing with gold coins on the floor as an advance payment. Seeing that fortune, the mercenaries change their attitude on the spot and swear eternal loyalty to their captain, who even looks a bit embarrassed. With that, the Demon King gives his first order and tells the captain to take Granada and put him in the group. All beaten up and covered in bandages, the elf formally introduces himself to his new and confused teammates. The look on the mercenaries' faces is one of pure shock and pity as they see the deplorable state of their newest recruit. They continue to stare at Granada with a mix of suspicion and pity, not understanding what's happening at all. In the end, despite all the weirdness and the injuries, the mercenary group comes together and welcomes the elf in a very clumsy way. Our protagonist observes the newly formed group and thinks that although they look like a mess, they are experienced mercenaries from the region and, more importantly, easy to control. His thoughts soon turn to the enemy to come, as he knows the only hero who would answer Hildren's call is Heron Cargill, the same one who defeated the Demon King of Lust. With that, the Red Falcon mercenaries, now with Granada among them, prepare for their first mission under the command of a new master. Verzdias then gives the order loud and clear to investigate the hero hired by the kingdom, this Heron Cargill. Meanwhile, back in his frozen fortress, the Demon King reflects that with Granada handling the hero situation, now it's his turn to get stronger as he observes the holograms of his new allies. Demonic energy would normally be used to strengthen himself or the tower, but since he sold it all, the only way to gain immediate power is something else. Thus, he needs spirit herbs, which are crystals of natural mana that grant absurd power to those who consume them. The Urzest Mountains are the ideal place to find them, as the mana storms and fierce monsters have kept humans away for ages. Because of this isolation, the herbs have continuously absorbed pure mana, becoming a true treasure of natural power. The protagonist knows it's not as efficient as using demonic energy, but it's something, and he decides to go look for some. Gordon, his servant, warns him that it's reckless to go out unprepared and that the monsters attack anyone who shows weakness. Diaz replies that the monsters aren't a problem, but agrees that finding the herbs would be difficult unless they had a tracker with exceptional mana sensing abilities. At that exact moment, a knock on the throne room door echoes through the place, leaving both of them surprised by the unexpected visit. Hernan then appears at the door with a slime spirit on her head and shyly asks if they're busy. The princess's sudden appearance catches both the Demon King and his servant by surprise. Soon after, she heads out excitedly into the snow with Diaz and her elemental spirits. The girl admits she was very bored and calls in his promise to let her decorate the 4th floor as she wished. Our protagonist agrees as long as they find the herbs, but mentally thinks it's crazy that she wants to decorate a Demon King's tower. The princess is radiant as she never imagined she'd be able to leave the tower and feels happy she decided to come. With a smile on her face, the girl pets her little fire spirit that accompanies her. Without warning, Diaz scoops her up and unfurls a pair of demonic wings, telling her to hold on tight. He then shoots into the sky with absurd speed, making the princess scream in surprise and shock. The wind from the ascent is so strong that the girl squeezes her eyes shut while clinging to the Demon King. Slowly, she begins to open her eyes, getting used to the sensation of flying. Her eyes widen in pure astonishment at the landscape, as it was dark the day she was taken. Flying over a vast landscape, Hernan finally realizes just how vast the world really is. She remembers her monotonous life in the castle, trapped in a cycle of training and studies, and thought she would meet her end that way. Excited, the girl asks if he knew she's the first person to soar over the mountains, but our protagonist doesn't care and tries to focus on the mission. Taking advantage of the situation, the girl asks him to call her Hernan, since they'll be spending a lot of time together. Our protagonist loses his patience with her audacity and reminds her of her place as a hostage, threatening to throw her in the dungeon before telling her to use her spirits to find the herbs. Obeying the order, the princess sends out her water spirits, which quickly spread across the vast frozen landscape in search of the herbs. Diaz thinks that even with the spirit's help, the search will take time, but it will still be much faster than if he or Gordon were to search alone. However, to the Demon King's surprise, Hernan announces shortly after that one of her spirits has already found an herb. When they arrive at the location, they come across a magnificent ice crystal lotus, a spirit herb that glows with an intense blue light. However, a pack of giant, savage monsters had already surrounded the plant, and our protagonist realizes they're not alone. With an imposing posture, he addresses the creatures and, as the Demon King orders them to leave the herb and depart in silence, the beasts refuse to obey, yelling that they don't follow the orders of demons and that they will wipe his kind out. Our protagonist lets out a dark laugh and admits that Gordon was right about it being impossible to reason with these creatures. Realizing he was a fool to expect any reason from them, Diaz decides to burn everything and prepares his demonic flames. The monsters charge with total fury, shouting orders to defend their territory and devour the intruder without mercy. The Demon King then concentrates an absurd amount of power in his hands, ready to unleash a devastating attack. Soon after, he fires a massive wave of purple energy that sweeps through everything in its path, engulfing the monsters amidst cries of agony. The attack is so powerful that the creatures are completely disintegrated, with no chance of defending against the protagonist's overwhelming force. Hernan flinches in fear as she sees two of the orcs leaping towards her, ready to attack. Our protagonist, however, doesn't even flinch and calmly prepares a sphere of demonic energy. He then unleashes an overwhelming shockwave that disintegrates all the surrounding monsters while protecting the princess behind him. The girl is completely shocked to see that the fearsome fool orcs, who even hunt ogres, couldn't even get close to Diaz. With that, the Demon King crosses his arms and concentrates his dark power, preparing to finish the job. The energy then molds into beasts of pure darkness that destroy the remaining enemies in a display of a true Demon King's power. After the massacre, the battlefield falls silent, with the bodies of the monsters scattered across the snow. Hernan approaches the spirit herb, marveling at the purity of its mana, but our protagonist tells her not to even think about taking it. To motivate her, Vers Diaz promises to give her the next herb they find, and the girl fills with determination as he reflects humans need an incentive to put in effort. However, even with the princess searching until she faints from exhaustion, they don't find any more herbs and decide to head back. The scene then takes us back to the imposing and solitary tower of Vers Diaz in the middle of the snowy mountains. Our protagonist holds the newly acquired herb and thinks that at first he considered the princess a mistake, but she might be quite useful in the end. Hernan sleeps soundly in the fourth-floor garden, covered by the Demon King's coat and surrounded by her spirits. Back in the throne room, Gordon reports that a message from Granada has arrived, and Vers Diaz is surprised by the mission's speed. The servant then reports that a group of 32 heroes led by Heron Cargill has left the capital and is already on its way to Urzist. Gordon continues the report, explaining that the heroes will follow the typical journey, forming groups and completing quests to get stronger along the way. Faced with the situation, the dedicated servant presents a detailed list of countermeasures he has prepared for the heroes' crusade. Our protagonist, however, rejects all suggestions with a simple gesture, sending Gordon's plans straight to the digital trash bin. With a confident smile, Vers Diaz reveals that this time, they won't send any monsters or interfere with the heroes in any way. From there, he reveals his true plan and orders Gordon to have Granada and his mercenaries join the crusade to gain the heroes' trust. Gordon becomes apprehensive as the tower is vulnerable, but the protagonist reassures him, saying he intends to fully reinforce its defenses. He then reveals with a malicious smile that he will use dwarves to strengthen the tower. The servant panics once again, shouting that after a human and an elf, bringing dwarves into the tower would make them the biggest joke in the kingdom. Vers Diaz releases a bit of his aura to shut the servant up, who immediately shrinks back. He then explains that he's not going to use the dwarves to fight, but rather their incredible magic engineering. The protagonist makes him imagine the scene of heroes, used to weak monsters on the first floor, being greeted by dozens of massive cannons. Gordon is left dumbfounded by the idea, as the heroes would never expect such an attack. Even though he thinks the plan is brilliant, he still grumbles that it goes completely against the doctrine. Seeing that he can't do anything, Gordon bows in defeat as his lord leaves for his new mission. Alone in the hall, he has a nervous breakdown and tears at his hair, screaming that his lunatic master is going kidnapping again. The scene then takes us to Volfner, the underground city of the dwarves, where the sound of hammers echoes everywhere. Amidst the forges, a dwarf works masterfully on hot metal, creating pieces with impressive skill. This is Roger Friedrich, the greatest dwarven blacksmith, and he is about to be kidnapped by the craziest demon king of all time. Arriving in the city, our protagonist reflects that although he has dealt with dwarves before, this is his first time in one of their cities. He enters a tavern called the Midnight Inn to get information about his target. Inside, Vers Diaz approaches a dwarf and says he came to order a weapon but is lost and asks where he can find the best blacksmith. The dwarf compliments him for knowing how to talk to them, and the demon king replies that he heard they like money as much as heroes do. The dwarf instructs him to go to a large hole in the center of the city and use the elevator that will take him wherever he wants. Without a second thought, our protagonist simply hops over the safety rail and falls towards the lower level of the city. He lands perfectly and follows the instructions of the dwarf from the tavern. Following the indicated path, Vers Diaz descends to the lowest floor and looks for the deepest room. Arriving there, he peeks through the ajar door, curious to see the master blacksmith in action. The protagonist finds Roger Friedrich working at his forge, surrounded by complex gears and mechanisms. The dwarf hammers the metal with a skill that seems to make mana itself dance around him. Vers Diaz watches attentively and wonders if the man before him is really the greatest blacksmith of all. Our protagonist then prepares to kidnap the blacksmith silently, but things don't go as planned. Out of nowhere, Roger Friedrich stops hammering the metal and turns his attention to the forge's entrance. In a swift move, he throws his flaming hammer towards the Demon King, who is surprised by the sudden action. Vers Diaz is shocked that he sensed his presence, even with his energy suppressed. Without wasting time, the dwarf leaps into the air and charges at the intruder in a fiery explosion. The impact of the attack generates a wave of energy that echoes throughout the forge, showing the blacksmith's strength. Vers Diaz blocks the blow with ease and deduces that his opponent can only be a hero. Roger Friedrich confirms the suspicion and introduces himself as a blacksmith who forges weapons for heroes before swearing that the demon will not leave there alive. With a mocking smile, our protagonist calls him weak and reveals he is no simple demon. He then assumes his true Demon King form and lifts the blacksmith by the neck with crushing force. Roger's hammer falls to the ground with a dull thud as he struggles to breathe. At that exact moment, a group of dwarven guards arrives at the scene, drawn by the sound of the fight. Upon entering, they find the forge empty and covered in smoke. Realizing that Roger Friedrich Friedrich has disappeared. The alarm sounds throughout the city, and the dwarves seal the exits and begin a frantic search for the intruder. In a dark corner of the city, Versdeus holds the blacksmith hostage, threatening him if he makes a sound. While the dwarf wonders why the Demon King is there, the Demon King recalls that dwarven blacksmiths dig secret tunnels for emergencies and, losing patience, tells Roger Friedrich to show him the way. Lying on the ground, the dwarf assumes Versdeus is after the princess and admits to himself that he only stayed quiet because he was afraid to fight. Desperate, he wonders why this is happening, and a notification reveals that his special hero trait is being weak. With a wicked smile, our protagonist realizes the blacksmith won't cooperate and proposes that he kidnap the princess in his place to be set free. From there, Versdeus blackmails him, asking how the other dwarves would see him if a rumor spread that he sold out the princess to save his own life. The mere idea of having his reputation tarnished sends Roger into a total panic, and he screams that he'll accept anything but that, calling the protagonist a demon. He reflects that everyone already considers him weak, and if they learn he handed over the princess, they'll believe it instantly, which would haunt him forever. Faced with the situation, the Demon King tells him to choose between selling the princess or following him, leaving the dwarf in a dilemma, as he wants to save the girl but doesn't want to be tortured. Thus, Versdeus swears by the Demon King's doctrine that if the blacksmith helps him, he will guarantee his safety. The dwarf is shocked, as he knows the doctrine is the faith that demon kings follow, and that a promise made based on it is never broken. Faced with such a serious and irresistible offer, Roger Friedrich starts to break out in a cold sweat as he makes his final decision. With a relieved expression, the blacksmith tells the Demon King to hurry through the tunnel, but our protagonist finds his face quite annoying. Back in Roger's workshop, the dwarven guards break in, but find it completely empty, with a status indicating the blacksmith is absent. Amidst all the confusion, a pink-haired princess observes the scene and wonders where Roger could have gone. Princess Louise Verft of the Dwarven Kingdom questions where the blacksmith went in the middle of forging her weapon, and a guard informs her that he seems to have been kidnapped. Princess Louise yells that Roger is also a hero, but one of the guards reminds her that as a blacksmith, he's not very strong. With that, she becomes enraged and throws her sword on the ground, ordering her men to find the rotten kidnapper and bring him to her. The Dwarven princess even threatens to have everyone's heads if they don't find him, leaving the guards completely terrified. Meanwhile, in Roger's secret passage, the blacksmith guides our protagonist through the dark and narrow tunnel. The path is so tight that Versdeus gets stuck right behind the dwarf and gets annoyed with the view in front of him. He complains that he can't stand looking at that scene anymore, and Roger apologizes, saying they're almost there. After a while, they finally exit the tunnel and arrive in a cave with a view of a bridge that seems to be the way out of the city. With that, Roger says his part is over, and that the Demon King will have to continue alone from that point. However, our protagonist appears in his demonic form and calls it foolishness, while the blacksmith reminds him of the oath on the doctrine. With a wicked smile, Versdeus reveals that he doesn't care about that garbage doctrine, leaving the dwarf shocked by such insanity. The blacksmith then sits down, defeated, and regrets not simply handing over the princess to save himself. Desperate, he tries to prove himself useful, saying he's the best blacksmith and can create any weapon the Demon King desires. Roger continues his plea, swearing he'll even leak information about the dwarven city, as all he wants is to survive. Faced with such forced loyalty, our protagonist agrees to show mercy, and the dwarf thanks him, praising him as a great demon king. But in his thoughts, Roger calls him a fool and swears that the moment he gets out of there, he will gather a squad to finish him. With a look of pure hatred, the dwarf vows to himself that he will make the Demon King forever regret letting him escape. However, Roger's revenge plan goes down the drain as he next appears completely petrified in a flowery garden. Back on the 4th floor of the tower, the blacksmith remains in a state of shock while Gordon freaks out next to Hernan at the arrival of the new member. The dedicated servant can't believe his lord brought a dwarf, and a hero at that, into the tower, but Versdeus tells him to be quiet. Gordon even tries to deliver a report from Granada that appears on a screen, but our protagonist ignores it and says he'll look at it later. Hernan then approaches the blacksmith and asks if he came to rescue her, but soon realizes the situation is very different from what she imagined. Roger questions the Demon King about their deal, and Versdeus clarifies that he only promised to let him live, not to set him free. From there, the protagonist reveals that he simply knocked him out and carried him there, as it was obvious he couldn't be trusted on the way. Upon realizing he has been completely tricked, the dwarf starts to laugh strangely and uncontrollably. His laughter becomes becomes louder and more manic, indicating he has completely lost his sanity. The blacksmith's hysterical laughter echoes throughout the garden, making the situation even more bizarre and confusing for everyone. With a smirk, the Demon King asks if he's that happy about becoming his new subordinate. Amidst laughter and tears, Roger confirms that he is very happy with his new and unexpected position. Verse Diaz praises his attitude and says he will give him a mission, while the dwarf whimpers, asking what kind of task it would be. With that, our protagonist reveals his evil plan and orders him to install a row of giant cannons on the first floor to blow up all the heroes who dare to invade. Meanwhile, at the hero group's preparation base in Urgist, the adventurers gather to plan their next steps. Granada then reports via a communicator that he spread a rumor that the new Demon King uses black flames, so the heroes are equipping themselves with fire-resistant items. Furthermore, another rumor says the reason the new Demon King isn't sending monsters is because he's afraid of the hero group, which is why they haven't lost morale yet. Our protagonist explains that the hero group won't gain anything from this, because without battles, there's no glory or money, and over time, their interest will fade, and they won't get any stronger. With that, Versdeas tells him to continue monitoring, and Granada understands his master's move. The elf realizes that by not sending monsters, the Demon King is weakening the hero group, and that he knows human nature very well. He wonders if there has ever been a Demon King like this before and enters the hall, feeling lucky not to be an enemy. Back at the tower, Versdeas imposes a single restriction on Roger, not to use mana stones, and says he can modify the first floor as he wishes. The blacksmith immediately complains that traps without mana stones don't work on heroes, but the protagonist simply tells him to figure it out. He explains that heroes are blessed by the dimension itself, so their energy detection is excellent, and if he uses mana stones, they will notice the traps before they are even activated. Our protagonist then loses his patience and threatens to find another blacksmith if Roger made a mistake in bringing him. Afraid of being discarded, the dwarf reveals that there is a magic tool that hides traces of mana, that he himself created it over 3 years, and that it's in his workshop. The Demon King is immediately suspicious and asks if that isn't the best escape plan the blacksmith could think of. Versdeas says he will trust him just this once, but places a strange necklace around the dwarf's neck, who asks what it is. With a sinister smile, he reveals that it's a magic tool that separates the head from the body with a simple gesture, leaving Roger terrified. Furthermore, the protagonist shows a magic tool that causes a facial recognition disturbance and warns that if the dwarf takes off the necklace, he will consider it an escape attempt, leaving the blacksmith terrified. With that, Versdeas travels carefully through various kingdoms to gather the necessary supplies and cannon materials for the tower. Over the course of a month, he buys all the necessary materials and stores them in a subspace pocket. After getting everything he needed, he returns to Volfner, the underground city of the dwarves. Meanwhile, in the dwarven city, the chaos continues with the relentless search for the kidnapper. Princess Louise is completely furious because a month and a half have passed and her men still haven't found the blacksmith, calling them incompetent. One of the guards explains that there are too many tunnels dug by the blacksmiths, and that although they are investigating them one by one, there's a high chance the culprit has already escaped. The dwarven princess shouts that it's obvious he escaped because if he were still there, he'd be an idiot, not a kidnapper. With that, she gives them exactly 2 more weeks and warns that if they don't find the culprit by then, they will all pay with their lives. Louise then orders them to hurry and seal all the tunnels the blacksmiths have made, and the guards rush to obey. The princess takes out her anger on some training dummies, showing all her frustration with the situation. She then glares at the weapon Roger was making before he was kidnapped, and thinks that should be her sword. With an insane look, she tells Roger to stay alive because he can't meet his end until he finishes her weapon. At that exact moment, the blacksmith appears hidden behind a pillar, watching the princess from a distance. The girl then turns around with a curious expression, as if she had sensed someone's presence. A notification confirms that the facial recognition interference mask is working normally, allowing him to go unnoticed. Louise, however, deduces that the location of a blacksmith's secret tunnel can only be known by the blacksmith himself. From there, she stares at the hidden dwarf and calls him by name, asking if he really is Roger. The blacksmith is completely shocked that she recognized him, even with the mask working perfectly. The dwarven princess then crosses her arms and starts to laugh, wondering how he's walking around so casually. With a psychopathic look, she accuses him of hiding just so he wouldn't have to make her weapon, but Roger denies it, saying it's all a misunderstanding. Louise doesn't believe a word and says he dared to humiliate her, and that from that moment on, he has become a slave who will spend his entire life making weapons for her. Furthermore, the princess prepares to punish him for running away and concentrates energy in her gauntlet while the dwarf begs for mercy. However, just as she was about to strike, a blast of purple energy hits her dead on. The impact of the blow throws her back, and the princess shouts furiously, asking who's there. At that moment, Vers Diaz enters the scene with an imposing presence. He then orders Roger to get the equipment he mentioned, and the blacksmith obeys immediately. Louise questions what the protagonist is doing and asks why he is helping that despicable dwarf, and Vers Diaz replies that he is the master of the blacksmith she is oppressing. The princess calls it absurd and yells that Roger is her slave before flying at the Demon King. With that, she delivers a sequence of powerful punches at the protagonist, who defends against the attacks. With a focused look, our protagonist prepares for the fight. From there, he blocks the princess's fist with his demonic energy. The girl is surprised that he managed to stop her attack so easily. However, the Demon King is also astonished by her absurd strength. With that, Louise lands a powerful blow that sends him flying and shouts that Roger's turn is coming. But Vers Diaz recovers in the blink of an eye and appears right behind the princess, immobilizing her. The fight continues with the protagonist holding her tightly while she tries to break free. This is Louise Berft, the second princess of the Dwarven Kingdom, and she is extremely strong even without being a heroine. Our protagonist remembers that even before his regression, she was already one of the strongest, and in the future, she would be even more powerful. Faced with the situation, he thinks he could finish her now, but to do so he would have to use all his power, and he's not as strong as he used to be. Besides, using his full strength would attract the guards, and they would find out he's a Demon King, which would complicate everything. Meanwhile, Roger works desperately on a giant machine, trying to disassemble it as quickly as possible. The Demon King then appears out of nowhere and grabs him, asking if he got the equipment, and the dwarf replies that he's still in the middle of the process. The machine in question is the Mana Phantom, an invention of Roger's that serves to hide traces of mana. Vers Diaz loses his patience and threatens him, saying to get it done in 1 minute or he'll meet his end, and the blacksmith panics, promising to be as fast as he can. The dwarven princess attacks without permission, and our protagonist yells for Roger to know that if things get tight, he will leave him behind, which makes the blacksmith reply that he's almost done. Vers Diaz reflects on how long he can hold out without using his true power and magic energy, and even though he can't guarantee it, he has no choice but to try. Faced with the situation, Louise advances with a devastating attack that creates a large explosion of energy. She holds him tightly and shouts that she doesn't know where he came from but that he won't leave there alive, and then threatens to crush both of Roger's legs so he can never run away again. With a mocking smile, the protagonist comments that the way she talks, she sounds more like a Demon King, and tells her to give up because he's taking the blacksmith and his equipment. At that exact moment, the giant machine begins to disassemble with a deafening noise of gears. The blacksmith finally shouts that the disassembly is complete, and the equipment shines brightly, ready to be taken. Louise becomes completely furious, yelling that she can't believe Roger came back just to get that and asks if she seemed that easy to fool. Seeing the princess's distraction, our protagonist sees the perfect opening to act. Without wasting a second, he seizes the opportunity and lands a powerful kick on the girl, sending her flying. The impact of the blow is so strong that it opens a small crater in the workshop floor. Next, Vers Diaz activates his subspace pocket to store the machine and yells for Roger to get out of the way. The dwarven princess shouts that an attack like that won't even come close, but the subspace energy hits her head on. After the dust settles, the girl finds herself alone in the middle of the workshop with the equipment and the intruders already gone. The guards finally arrive and ask what's going on, and a furious Louise calls them slowpokes, asking if they only plan to show up after she was already done for. She then orders her men to hurry and pursue the intruders through the tunnel. However, a large explosion of fire occurs, completely blocking the passage. The dwarven princess realizes the tunnel is blocked and wonders if Roger hated making her weapon that much, but instead of being upset, she cracks a sinister smile, finding the whole situation very interesting. From there, Louise swears she will find the blacksmith on her own, even if she has to search the entire continent just to make him regret it. With a look full of hatred, the girl shouts Roger's name, promising a terrible revenge. After the dust settles, all that remains at the site are debris and some chains on the floor. The scene then shifts to the first floor of Vers Diaz's tower, where the immense machine has been installed. Gordon and Hernan are left with their jaws on the floor at the size of the device, and our protagonist explains that it's a mana device they need to stop the heroes. Faced with the situation, Roger informs him that the installation of the Mana Phantom is complete, and the Demon King tells him to activate the equipment as soon as possible. Vers Diaz warns him that after all the work they went through to get it, it had better be worth it, and the blacksmith nervously agrees before initiating the automatic activation. Thus, the machine begins to work and a large blue energy forms within it. Next, the device emits a light so strong that it ends up blinding everyone in the Great Hall. Two notifications appear in the air. The first informs that the tower has detected the mana phantom, and the second asks if he wishes to spend 10,000 points to synchronize the machine. The Great Demon King is completely surprised, as he had no idea the tower had such a function. Curious about the new possibility, our protagonist decides there's only one way to find out and orders the synchronization, consuming a portion of his points. Soon after, the system informs that the mana phantom recognizes Demon King Verzdias as its master and that its power source has been fully converted from mana to magic energy. The protagonist then calls Roger, who immediately defends himself, saying he never imagined the machine would merge with the tower and that the power source would change, leaving the dwarf thrilled with the discovery of the century. Thus, to test the new function, Verzdias turns to the crown princess and tells her to use any spell she wants. The girl gets super excited with the permission and unleashes a giant vortex of elemental magic, while Gordon freaks out about his organized tower being completely messed up. Outside the entrance, the Great Demon King observes the chaos and reflects that if she unleashes that much mana inside the tower, normally all that energy should be detectable even from outside the fortress. However, as he looks at his dwelling, he can see nothing but an immense, blinding white light. He is completely shocked as he can't see the interior or feel any energy coming from it, and finally understands the power of a mana phantom synchronized with the tower. From there, the Demon King wonders what would happen if he manipulated the tower in this state and uses his demonic energy to test it. To his utter surprise, the tower reacts to his power in a completely unexpected way. Before his eyes, the immense structure simply disappears into the snowy landscape. Our protagonist looks at his own hand, still emanating dark energy, barely able to believe what he just did. With a simple gesture of his hand, he makes the imposing tower reappear in the middle of the mountains as if nothing had happened. Thus, he understands that he can hide his fortress whenever he wants, but realizes that the new ability devours an absurd amount of magic points. Our protagonist cracks a smile and thinks that although it's hard to use now, the new ability will be very useful later on. Completely euphoric, Roger begs his lord to let him examine the device and the tower, even if it's just for a little bit. He continues his plea, saying that nothing like it has ever been seen in history, and that he must be the one to study this historic discovery, with the protagonist thinking the dwarf looks like a demon hungry for a fight. Thus, the Demon King makes a deal, saying that if the blacksmith eliminates the heroes on the first floor with his traps, he can do whatever he wants, and Roger swears with all excitement that he will take them all down. While the dwarf celebrates, Verzdias turns to Hernan with a proposal, telling her to deal with the heroes who reach the fourth floor, which leaves her completely shocked. The princess questions the idea of fighting heroes, reminding him that she is a princess, but he retorts that she is also a genius spirit mage who doesn't want to go back to the palace. Pretending to reconsider, our protagonist says that perhaps it's too much to ask a sheltered princess who knows nothing of the world to betray her own people. Ignoring the taunt, the girl starts thinking about how she will fight, considering using stones, while the Demon King is shocked at how easily she accepts betraying her people. He then explains that she just needs to throw the heroes off and make them see her as an enemy, promising another reward if everything goes well. The princess agrees to keep an eye out for an opening but imposes a condition, asking to be introduced not as a princess but as his subordinate. Even confused by the strange request, the Great Demon King agrees, leaving the girl visibly excited by the response. Full of confidence, Hernan starts to wonder how she should fight, even suggesting using her charms, but Verzdias cuts her off and tells her to just follow his orders. Back on his throne with Gordon by his side, Verzdias reflects that with this, the preparations are practically complete. His plan is simple: first, reduce the number of heroes on the first floor with the mana cannons, and then finish off the rest on the fourth floor, using the princess as bait. However, he knows this is far from enough, as at this rate, his plan won't even eliminate half of the more than 200 heroes that are coming. Faced with the situation, the protagonist concludes that in the end, he himself needs to get stronger and decides to go after more spirit herbs, which, when contaminated with his magic energy, work very well on demons. Thus, he calls the princess to go out and look for more herbs, and the girl excitedly celebrates the chance to leave the tower once again. The two then walk through the white expanse while Hernan's spirits search for herbs but can't find any nearby. The Demon King complains that this is the third time they've gone out, and that they were lucky last time, calling the spirits useless, which leaves Hernan a bit confused. Suddenly, a giant, monstrous hand appears in front of the two, interrupting their search. Soon after, a huge creature resembling a white, furred, blue-skinned orc appears before them with an intimidating presence. Verzdias prepares for combat, as he recognizes the creature as a feral orc, and is already tired of fighting that annoying race. However, to everyone's surprise, the monster kneels before the protagonist with a loud thud in the snow. The creature then introduces itself as Grutu, chief of the Blue Frost tribe, and asks the Demon King to accept his tribe as vassals. From there, several other orcs appear out of nowhere and kneel in a gesture of submission, repeating their chief's request. The top student of the academy is completely confused by the request and wonders why on earth they want to become his servants. Grutu explains that their ancestors were demons who betrayed the demon realm, and that because they carry this sin, they ask for the honor of serving him. Versdius cuts him off and tells him to spare the pretty words, as he understands they only want to become his vassals to get stronger, since magic energy is better for them than spirit herbs. The tribe chief admits that the Demon King saw through his plan and orders them to bring an item for him. With that, one of the orcs brings a chest and opens it, revealing 3 rare and shiny spirit herbs as an offering for their loyalty. Upon receiving the herbs, our protagonist realizes that's why they couldn't find any and comments that for a feral orc, Grutu is quite clever. The chief then explains that to survive there, his tribe values wisdom over brute force, and the Demon King questions if that's why they came looking for him. Because they didn't have enough power, Grutu just lowers his head, ashamed by Versdius's direct question. The great Demon King cracks a smile and reflects on the idea of wisdom over strength. With that, he likes the orc's attitude and accepts him as his vassal, releasing a powerful magic energy. However, he imposes one condition and says he will only accept Grutu, leaving the tribe chief completely surprised. Thus, the protagonist tells him to wander the snowfields and grow his tribe, marking him with a magic seal. He further instructs him to wait for his orders and promises that greater rewards will come in the future. From there, the tribe chief undergoes a transformation and officially becomes a vassal of the Demon King. Before his new master, Grutu gives his thanks and swears to dedicate his total loyalty to him. Next, all the other orcs of the tribe bow in a gesture of respect and devotion. With that, the forces of Versdius's tower in the Urgest Mountains begin to take shape. Outside, he now has the feral orc legion to protect the territory. On the first floor, Roger and his mana cannons are ready to welcome the heroes, and on the 4th floor, Hernan Hilderin and her elemental spirits await as the last line of defense. Back on his throne, the Demon King observes his pieces on the holographic board and concludes that with this, everything is finally in its rightful place. With a look of pure determination, he challenges the heroes to come, so he can finally pay for the humiliation of his past life. The scene then takes us to a vast, snow-covered forest in the Urgest Mountains. There, the hero group led by Hiron Cargill finally reaches its destination, and the hero comments that they managed to arrive with Granada by his side. The group of adventurers then faces the vastness of the Ice Mountains, the stage for their final battle. From there, they arrive at the preparation base for the hero's journey, a fortress city built to support adventurers. Inside, a grand banquet is held in honor of the heroes who came for the mission. A lord thanks Heron for coming, and the hero politely returns the compliment, thanking him for the magnificent banquet. With that, the lord asks Hiron to say a few words to raise everyone's morale, and though hesitant, the hero agrees. Excited, the lord announces loud and clear that the great hero Heron would like to say a few words. The attention of everyone in the hall turns to the main table where the expedition leaders are seated. With a cuff to clear his throat, Heron prepares to begin his speech. He then addresses all his fellow heroes, nobles, knights, mages, mercenaries, and merchants, saying that their long expedition is finally reaching its climax. Hiron continues, saying that even the Demon King must be terrified, as he hasn't sent a single monster to stop them, but that they shouldn't let their guard down, as they have made all possible preparations. With that, he raises his glass and fervently announces that tomorrow will be the great day they take the head of the foolish Demon King who dared to kidnap the crown princess of Hilderin, Hernan. He then shouts for them to remember once more who they are, and who the true masters of this world are. Everyone in the hall raises their glasses in a toast to justice, and the hero invites them to eat and drink to celebrate. Granada observes the crowd and reflects that, as the Demon King predicted, the size of the expedition hasn't increased, but it hasn't decreased either. He understands that it was Heron's charisma that brought them this far, as the hero secured funding from the guilds and kept the mercenaries in line the entire way. But the elf remembers that the tower he saw last time was empty and wonders if it won't be easily conquered and if he should betray the heroes right now. Soon after, he panics and scolds himself, because if the subjugation is successful, he will be free from the curse, which is actually a very good thing. With that, Granada tries to compose himself and decides to send a report to his master while getting some fresh air. Already outside on the balcony, he reports that they have arrived in Horton Walk and will climb the mountain tomorrow after a brief rest. But Versdius tells him not to contact him anymore and gives him a warning. The protagonist warns him to be careful with the snow when climbing the mountain and not to let his guard down during the night. And to finish, he gives one last warning, telling the elf never to stand near the tower's door when it opens. demons, leaving Granada completely confused by the cryptic message. At that exact moment, Harren appears and asks what he's doing there alone, and the elf gets startled, making up an excuse that he was just getting some air. The hero then offers him a glass of fruit wine, saying it's a drink that elves usually like, and Granada accepts, thanking him. Harren comments that he seems worried, and the elf asks if he thinks they will succeed in subjugating the Demon King. To Granada's surprise, the hero admits that he actually doesn't know either, which leaves the elf completely shocked. Harren then explains that although people trust and follow him, subjugating a Demon King's tower is always hell and has never been an easy task. The noble elf then questions him about the difficulty of the mission, remembering that Harren has already defeated the Demon King of Lust, and that a rookie shouldn't be a big problem. Next, Granada remembers that no one knows how he achieved that victory and asks the hero to tell the story to inspire everyone. Harren falls silent for a moment, seeming to reflect on his new companion's question. With a humble smile, he replies that it was only possible because he had brave comrades by his side who were always on the front lines, like Granada himself. From there, the hero fills him with confidence, saying he will take the lead and that if they join forces, victory will be certain. With a smile on his face, the spy agrees to follow the plan and fight alongside him. Thus, the two re-enter the banquet hall, ready for the battle that awaits them. Granada, however, doesn't notice the dark look in Harren's eyes behind that heroic smile. The hero then eats a small insect and thinks to himself that he has joined brave comrades and that he's counting on the elf Granada this time. The next morning, the fortress city is in celebration as the hero group departs. The crowd bids farewell to the adventurers with cries of support and good luck, wishing a long life to Harren Cargill and the other lords. With that, the immense army of heroes marches towards its final destination through a canyon in the Urgest mountain range. Along the way, some heroes comment that they were worried, but the place doesn't seem like anything special, with little snow and sunny weather. Others even joke that the disaster-class monsters must be hibernating or got scared by Harren's presence. Little did they know that a small purple energy was already hovering over one of the heroes' heads, indicating that danger was much closer than they imagined. Suddenly, a purple goo falls on the adventurer's head, and he wonders what it is. In the blink of an eye, an army of gulls emerges from the canyon walls, completely surrounding the hero group. Harren shouts that they have finally appeared and orders all forces to prepare for combat. He then instructs them not to panic and to protect their comrades, as the canyon isn't long, and the knights should cover the mages so they can advance. However, one of the heroes alerts him that an ice giant has appeared up ahead, and Harren tells everyone to retreat immediately. The immense skeletal creature completely blocks the passage with an overwhelming presence. Faced with the situation, Harren orders everyone to escape the canyon together while he and Lord Wharton take care of the ice giant. The hero then charges alone towards the monster, ready for combat. The ice giant glares at him with its glowing red eyes, prepared to attack. With a confident smile, Harren says that an ice giant won't be stronger than the Demon King of Lust. With that, he runs towards the creature and dodges its powerful attack with impressive agility. The hero then leaps and prepares to counter-attack the giant monster. The giant tries to crush him with a punch, but Harren masterfully dodges once again. He then jumps and delivers a precise blow to the skeletal creature. The hero moves with incredible speed, showing all his skill and power in combat. With a focused look, Harren finds the perfect opening for the final attack. With that, he concentrates all his energy and delivers a massive blow that cuts the ice giant in half. The hero then shouts for everyone to flee as quickly as possible. Seizing the chance Harren created, the group of heroes runs desperately to get out of the canyon. The ice giant then explodes in a shower of energy after the precise blow. The explosion is so powerful that it ends up throwing the heroes out of the canyon with the impact. Fallen in the snow and exhausted, the survivors try to recover from the surprise attack. Some complain that the place is insane and not made for humans, while others comment that the casualties were few thanks to Harren. From there, they begin to speculate that the hero absorbed the power of the Demon King of Lust and is now on the same level as one. Granada observes the scene and thinks that if it's really Harren, he might be able to defeat that Demon King. The hero then stands up, determined to continue the mission and lead his companions to victory. However, the peace is short-lived as an army of feral orcs appears on top of a nearby mountain. Harren recognizes the creatures and feels the demonic energy coming from them, confirming they are servants of the Demon King. The tribe chief then welcomes the foolish heroes to Urgest with a sinister smile. Granada prepares for combat and says he will take care of that trash immediately, but Harren tells him to wait as he hears a strange sound. At that moment, Granada remembers his master's warning to be careful with the snow. The elf finally understands what the Demon King meant and panics at the terrible revelation. With a look look of pure hatred, the Orc chief swears that none of the heroes will manage to reach the tower, and with that, the ground begins to shake violently. The group of heroes then looks up at the mountain and is faced with a terrifying scene. Granada screams in desperation, wondering how on earth they were supposed to be careful with that. He calls the Demon King a crazy scumbag, as a gigantic avalanche is heading right for them. In total panic, the spy shouts for everyone to run for their lives. As the snow swallows the heroes, back in his tower, our protagonist watches everything through his holographic screens with a snap of his fingers. With a wicked smile, Versdiaz welcomes the heroes once again, and swears that this time, he will be the one to hunt them all down to the very last one.